ideally, what you'd want is probably inside your greenhouse to be from about 23 to 26 degrees. Naturally, you don't have that outside, and as such, we're still gonna be outside of that little window, but there are things that we can do not to be so high on the scale up in the 38s and the 40s. And those are some of the things that we have been looking at. Now, cooling down your greenhouse can be done two ways. It can be done naturally using the wind, and that is what we call passive ventilation. When you introduce cooling systems, right, we refer to that as being active ventilation. And there's also been a little bit of gray area where somebody will say that they're using fans. If you're using fan, you're not really doing a cooling system, right? You're actually just moving air around. But when you talk about an actual cooling system, you have to talk about things like evaporative cooling, air conditioning, and things like those. Right, so that is more at the higher end of the technology. And I know that over time, that will also be coming our way, because due to the effects of climate change, we all have noticed that probably last July was one of the hottest period that we have ever experienced in a very, very long time. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they said that since they have started in probably the 70s, it's probably one of the highest recorded temperature that they have. So the bad thing about it is that they are telling us that it will only get worse. But what do? We can't roll over and die. What we have to do is that we have to evolve, and we have to now come up with ways and systems that we can continue doing what we're doing. That said, we had long known from a long time, because our greenhouse industry started in Jamaica officially in 2005. And that was after Hurricane Ivan, yes. Fortunately for myself, I was doing greenhouses from about 1989. What this project aims to do is to see if we can correct some of the errors that were made. All right? So this aspect of our optimization will now only speak to passive ventilation, right? And passive ventilation, as I said before, is when the structure is cooled naturally by the wind. Now, if you're gonna have a structure being cooled passively by the wind, it means that the wind direction has to be absolutely taken into consideration. All right? Okay, so that is the first thing. Persons would come here and tell you that if you're doing a greenhouse, you need to take into consideration more the direction of the sunrise and the sunset. And they have some amount of value to that. There's some amount of value to that. But luckily for us, based upon where we are located within, the region and in relation to the equator, we do not have light being a limiting factor. But the problem that we have is actually the buildup of heat within our structures. So if you had to make a choice between choosing for orientation for light or orientation for heat dissipation, you definitely have to choose orientation for heat dissipation, and that would now allow you to structure the greenhouse or orient the greenhouse according to the wind flow. But again, we also have another hindrance. All of our islands are primarily at sea level. Most of them are also very mountainous, and based upon that, a lot of times the orientation of the greenhouse will also have to go according to the topography that you have. Right, Mr. H? So when you came here, started this nursery, you had to do a little bit of pushing and all of that stuff so that you could get it laid out. So a lot of times you have to modify the space for that. So I guess we can agree that orientation to capitalize on wind flow is what we need to pay attention to. Now, what is this proper orientation? If the wind is coming from the direction of the camera, all right, then the orientation of the greenhouse should actually be, the length of the greenhouse should be perpendicular to the direction of the wind flow. So it's not like what some persons think, that you turn it the narrow way and the wind would actually blow right through the entire greenhouse like a tunnel ventilated structure. But most of your tunnel ventilated structures are not going to be passively cool. They're going to have active ventilation systems where you have like fans in the roof, horizontal airflow fans, and then you would have extractor fans, and you probably would have evaporative cooling systems on the side. So that is a technology that I think that over time we will have to get to. Fortunately for myself and a few persons back home, we have just landed a grant funding, and I was on a meeting last night, and we heard that we were successful in getting the grant, and that is what we're going to be working on in Jamaica. And when you have that now, where you can actually create the environment within the greenhouse space, then you can grow anything that you want to grow anytime throughout the year, because you create that environmental condition within the space. So you just have to know, think about your pest management and your nutrition and all and the rest of stuff. And you could be growing strawberries at sea level. And we have several examples of that when you look at places like Israel. And they are leading producers of almost everything. And they're actually doing it at sea level and in a desert. Right. You understand? So we have absolutely no excuse as island states for not doing better with respect to production. Unfortunately, I was also on another island, and they're actually putting it in probably a huge storage space to store food, you know, that will be imported. And I'm not saying that that is wrong, but parallel to that, we should also have production systems which will also ensure that local farmers are secured and that local production is developed exponentially compared to what you want to take in. You know, but greenhouse farming to a great extent has been about vegetables. And of course, we need to have our tubers and we need to have our corms and all of those things. So there's a space for everybody.